Captain Samuel Steele had attended diplomatic dinners on 12 different worlds, but he'd never seen one quite like this. The great hall of the Valdari Palace stretched impossibly high, its crystalline walls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to the emotions of the gathered crowd. Warriors in ceremonial armor lined the walls, their scaled hide gleaming under lights that shifted from gold to deep crimson as the evening progressed. At the head table, Princess Kaelin Vorthak commanded attention like a force of nature. Nearly 7 feet tall with the characteristic ridged bone structure of her people, she wore battle dress that somehow managed to be both functional and elegant. Her silver hair was braided with what appeared to be actual metal wire, and when she moved, Samuel could see the subtle armor plating beneath her skin that made the Valdari nearly indestructible in combat. "Captain Steele," she said, her voice carrying easily across the hall without seeming to be raised, "you honor us with your presence at this feast of alliance." Samuel inclined his head respectfully. "The honor is mine, Your Highness. Earth is grateful for the opportunity to establish formal relations with the Valdari Empire." The princess smiled, showing teeth that were just slightly too sharp for human comfort. "Tell me, Captain, what do you think of our customs? Do they seem primitive compared to human sophistication?" Samuel sensed a trap in the question but couldn't identify its nature. Around the hall, hundreds of Valdari warriors had grown quiet, their attention focused on his response. "I think," he said carefully, "that any culture capable of interstellar travel and maintaining peace across 50 star systems for 3 centuries has customs worth understanding rather than judging." A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Whether approval or disappointment, Samuel couldn't tell. Princess Kaelin's expression remained unreadable. Diplomatically said, "But perhaps you would be interested in a more direct demonstration of our ways." She gestured to the center of the hall, where servants were clearing a large circular space. "Among the Valdari, we settle questions of honor through trial by combat. Would you care to observe a traditional challenge? I would be honored to witness your traditions, Your Highness." "Excellent." The princess stood, her impressive height making Samuel feel distinctly average. "Then I formally challenge you, Captain Samuel Steele of Earth, to single combat for the honor of your people and the terms of our alliance." The hall erupted in cheers and battle cries. Samuel felt his heart sink as he realized what had just happened. He'd been maneuvered into a position where declining would be seen as cowardice, and accepting would likely result in his death at the hands of a warrior princess whose people considered her undefeated in over 200 duels. "Your Highness," he said, raising his voice to be heard over the crowd, "I'm honored by your challenge, but surely there are protocols. Are you declining?" Princess Kaelin's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Do the humans send ambassadors who cannot defend their honor when questioned?" Samuel looked around the hall at faces that ranged from amused to openly contemptuous. This was what they'd been building toward all evening, public humiliation of the human representative to demonstrate Valdari superiority. He was meant to grovel, to beg for mercy, to prove that his people were weak and unworthy of true alliance. Instead, he found himself smiling. "Your Highness," he said, his voice carrying with surprising authority, "I accept your challenge." The cheering faltered slightly. Apparently, they'd expected more pleading. Samuel continued, his voice growing stronger. "And by right of combat acceptance, according to the ancient laws your people hold sacred, I claim thee as my future bride." The hall fell silent so suddenly that Samuel could hear his own heartbeat. Princess Kaelin's confident expression froze, her sharp teeth still bared in what was no longer quite a smile. "What did you say?" she whispered. "I invoke the law of combat courtship, as written in the Code of Vorthak 3 centuries ago," Samuel replied calmly, pulling out a small tablet and reading from it. "When a challenge is offered and accepted with intent to claim, the combat becomes a trial of worthiness for marriage. I accept your challenge, Princess Kaelin Vorthak, and claim you as my intended bride." The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Samuel could see various emotions flickering across the princess's face. Shock, disbelief, and something that might have been panic. You You cannot. She stammered. Actually, I can. Samuel's smile widened. I've spent considerable time studying Valdari law in preparation for these negotiations. The law of combat courtship hasn't been repealed, merely, rarely invoked. Something about most challengers being too intimidated to attempt claiming a Valdari princess. An elderly Valdari in elaborate robes approached the head table. Your Highness, he said quietly, the human speaks truth. The ancient law stands. If you proceed with the challenge after his claim has been made, you are bound by its terms. Princess Kaelin stared at Samuel as if seeing him for the first time. Do you have any idea what you've just done? I believe I've just turned your attempt to humiliate me into your own engagement announcement. Samuel raised his goblet in a mock toast. Unless, of course, your Highness wishes to withdraw her challenge and admit that the thought of marrying a human is too frightening to contemplate. The fire that had been building in the princess's eyes throughout their exchange suddenly blazed to full intensity. But now, instead of confident superiority, Samuel could see something else there, uncertainty, calculation, and perhaps just a hint of respect. You think you're clever, human. I think I'm engaged to a warrior princess who just discovered that her intended husband isn't quite as predictable as she expected. Samuel set down his goblet and looked directly into those blazing eyes. The question now, my future wife, is whether you're brave enough to see this through. For the first time since he'd arrived on Valdris, Samuel saw Princess Kaelin at a complete loss for words. Around them, the hall remained frozen in shocked silence, waiting to see how their undefeated champion would respond to finding herself outmaneuvered by the soft human she'd meant to crush. Samuel found himself looking forward to her answer. Princess Kaelin stood motionless for so long that Samuel began to wonder if he'd accidentally triggered some kind of Valdari combat trance. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a dangerous edge that made several nearby warriors step back. You dare invoke the ancient laws against me? I dare follow them to their logical conclusion, Samuel replied evenly. Your challenge was public, your terms were clear, and my acceptance was witnessed by your entire court. Unless the Valdari have abandoned honor along with their ancient traditions. The calculated insult hit its mark. Kaelin's spine straightened, and the bone ridges along her forehead flared with bioluminescent anger. Very well, human. You want to play with laws you don't understand. The combat courtship trial consists of 3 phases: physical prowess, strategic wisdom, and worthiness of character. Succeed in all 3, and you earn the right to court me. Fail in any. She smiled, showing those sharp teeth again. And the engagement is dissolved, along with any alliance between our peoples. Samuel felt a chill. She'd just raised the stakes beyond personal humiliation, now the entire diplomatic mission hung in the balance. I understand the terms. Do you? Kaelin descended from the dais with predatory grace. Phase 1 begins at dawn. Traditional Valdari combat, no weapons, no armor, no mercy. You'll face me in single combat until one of us yields or falls unconscious. The crowd began murmuring excitedly. Samuel heard phrases like bone crusher and 3 minutes being tossed around with the enthusiasm of people placing bets. I should mention, Kaelin continued, circling him slowly, that I've never lost a single combat trial. My record stands at 214 victories, 0 defeats. I broke my last opponent's rib so thoroughly that it took their medical technology 6 months to reconstruct his chest cavity. Impressive, Samuel said. Though I notice you said yields or falls unconscious, not to the death. How civilized. Kaelin paused in her circling. Death would end the trial prematurely. Where's the education in that? Education? For you, in understanding why humans should know their place. For my people, in observing the physical limitations of your species. She stopped directly in front of him. Tell me, Captain, what exactly makes you think you can survive even 5 minutes against me? Samuel studied her for a moment, 7 feet of perfectly conditioned warrior, with natural armor plating and reflexes that could make her move faster than human eyes could track. By any reasonable measure, he was about to commit elaborate suicide. "Well," he said thoughtfully, "you're assuming this is about surviving. Explain. You challenged me to demonstrate the strength of humanity. I accepted to prove we're not weak. But neither of us is actually trying to win this fight." Kalen's brow ridges furrowed. "I'm not. You're trying to teach me a lesson about Veldari superiority. I'm trying to prove that humans don't break easily under pressure." Samuel smiled. "Both are essentially educational endeavors. The question is who learns more from the experience." Several nearby Veldari exchanged confused glances. This wasn't how challenge acceptance speeches usually went. "You're either very brave or very stupid," Kalen said. "Probably both. Though I should mention that I've read about Veldari combat philosophy. Your people value cunning as much as strength, adaptation as much as raw power. You don't just overwhelm opponents, you outthink them. Your point?" "My point is that you've just engaged in single combat with someone who's spent 3 years studying your fighting techniques, your cultural values, and your personal combat record." Samuel's smile widened. "Who exactly is being educated here?" For the first time since his arrival, Princess Kalen looked genuinely intrigued rather than merely amused. "You studied my combat record? 214 victories, as you mentioned. But also patterns. You favor left-handed attacks in the opening moments, you use your natural armor to absorb hits while positioning for counterstrikes, and you have a tendency to end fights quickly against opponents you don't respect." Samuel paused. "The question is whether you'll respect me enough to make this interesting." The princess was quiet for a long moment, her silver eyes studying him with new intensity. "You realize that knowledge of my techniques won't compensate for the physical disadvantages? I'm stronger, faster, and significantly more durable than any human." "True. But I have advantages you don't. Such as unpredictability. You fought 214 Veldari warriors who all learn the same techniques, follow the same traditions, and think in the same patterns. You've never fought a human." Samuel gestured around the hall. "No one here has any idea what human combat training looks like." Kalen's expression shifted from intrigue to something that might have been anticipation. "And what does human combat training look like?" "Adaptive, improvisational, and completely willing to ignore tradition if it means winning." Samuel inclined his head respectfully. "I look forward to tomorrow's educational opportunity, Your Highness." The princess stared at him for another long moment, then threw back her head and laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of steel. "Oh, human. You're either going to surprise me or die very entertainingly. Either way, tomorrow should be interesting." As the crowd began to disperse, chattering excitedly about the upcoming trial, Samuel found himself approached by the elderly advisor who'd confirmed the legal validity of his marriage claim. "Captain Steele," the advisor said quietly, "I am Chancellor Thorne, the princess's senior counselor. Might I suggest you spend tonight in prayer or meditation?" Very few beings have ever made Princess Kalen laugh with genuine delight. Those who have, rarely survive the experience. Samuel watched Kalen exit the hall, noting how the crowd parted before her like water before a ship's prow. "Chancellor, in your experience, what does it mean when she laughs like that?" "It means, Captain, that she's decided you might actually be worth fighting seriously. I'm not certain whether that's fortunate for you or not." As Samuel made his way to his quarters, he reflected on the evening's events. He'd successfully avoided humiliation, turned the tables on his challenger, and apparently impressed a warrior princess who'd never lost a fight. Now he just had to survive tomorrow's combat trial against someone who could probably break him in half without working up a sweat. Still, he thought as he began reviewing his notes on Veldari physiology and combat weaknesses, at least she was finally taking him seriously. For a diplomatic mission, that counted as progress. Dawn on Valdres painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson that Samuel might have found beautiful if he weren't about to engage in ritualized combat with a 7-foot warrior princess. The arena was an ancient amphitheater carved from living stone, with tiered seating that could accommodate thousands of spectators. Today, it seemed like every Veldari on the planet had come to watch the human get dismantled. Princess Kaelin entered the arena wearing form-fitting combat gear that showcased the natural armor plating along her arms and shoulders. She moved with the fluid grace of a predator, her silver hair bound back in a warrior's knot that revealed the subtle ridges along her skull that housed enhanced sensory organs. "Sleep well, Captain," she called as Samuel approached the center circle. "Like a baby," he replied, which was technically true if babies spent their night studying anatomical diagrams and practicing joint manipulation techniques. I dreamed of interesting ways to incapacitate you without causing permanent damage." Her smile was sharp but not entirely unkind. "Ready to begin your education?" Samuel performed a few stretching exercises, noting how the crowd's murmur shifted to amusement at his apparently casual preparation routine. "Actually, I have a question about the rules." "Questions are for before the trial begins, human." "This is important." "The combat courtship law, does it specify the nature of the physical trial?" Chancellor Thorne consulted an ornate tablet at the edge of the arena. "It states, trial by combat in the manner of warriors, Captain. And if the challenger wishes to demonstrate worthiness through alternative combat forms?" Kaelin paused in her own preparation, suddenly alert. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that there's more than one way to demonstrate combat prowess. Among humans, we have various martial traditions, some emphasize strength, others speed, others technique." Samuel smiled innocently. "I invoke my right as the challenged party to propose modifications to the trial format." The princess's eyes narrowed. "What modifications?" "Instead of single elimination combat, I propose a series of 3 contests. Pure strength, pure speed, and tactical adaptation. Best 2 out of 3 determines the victor. Trying to minimize your disadvantages?" Kaelin's tone was mocking, but Samuel caught the calculating look in her eyes. "Trying to maximize the educational value," he corrected. "After all, you want to understand human capabilities. 1 contest only shows you how quickly I lose. 3 contests show you how I lose, which is considerably more informative." The crowd buzzed with interest. This wasn't how these trials usually proceeded. "Very well," Kaelin said after a moment. 3 contests. But I choose the specifics of each trial." "Agreed." First trial, strength. We each attempt to move the trial stone from its resting position. Whoever moves it furthest wins. She gestured to a massive boulder at the arena's edge, easily 10 tons of solid rock. "Care to go first?" Samuel approached the stone, placed his hands against its surface, and pushed with everything he had. It shifted perhaps an inch before his leverage gave out. The crowd's laughter was good-natured but pointed. "Respectable effort," Kaelin said, stepping up to the stone. She braced herself, muscles rippling beneath her natural armor, and heaved. The massive boulder slid nearly 3 feet across the arena floor. "Trial 1 to me." "Impressive," Samuel acknowledged, genuinely meaning it. "Second trial." "Speed." We raced to the top of the arena wall and back. "First one to touch the center marker wins." Samuel looked up at the sheer stone wall rising 50 feet above them, then at Kaelin's clearly superior physiology. "Excellent choice." They lined up at the center marker. At Chancellor Thorne's signal, Kaelin exploded into motion, her enhanced reflexes and natural climbing abilities carrying her up the wall like a scaled missile. Samuel followed, using human mountaineering techniques that were efficient but dramatically slower. Kaelin reached the top, tagged the summit marker, and was halfway down before Samuel made it even 20 feet up the wall. She touched the center marker with time to spare, then watched with apparent amusement as Samuel completed his climb at a steady but unimpressive pace. Trial 2 to me as well, she announced as he finally returned to ground level. Shall we proceed to the third trial, or would you prefer to concede now? Oh, I'm quite interested in the third trial, Samuel said, checking his pulse rate with apparent concern. Tactical adaptation, you said? Indeed. A combat scenario where pure physical ability matters less than strategic thinking. Kalen's smile turned predatory. We each select a weapon from the traditional arsenal and engage in single combat until one yields or is incapacitated. Samuel surveyed the weapon rack, swords, spears, energy staffs, and various implements he couldn't immediately identify. Interesting selection. Do I understand correctly that this is where tactical thinking becomes more important than raw physical capability? Precisely. Your human cleverness against Valdari warrior training. In that case, Samuel said, reaching past all the impressive weapons to select what appeared to be a simple wooden staff, I choose this. Kalen selected an energy blade that hummed with power, its edge capable of cutting through most known materials. A staff? Against a thermal sword? It seemed appropriate. Samuel tested the staff's balance, noting its weight distribution and flexibility. Shall we begin? They circled each other warily. Kalen moved with perfect form, her blade work showcasing centuries of refined technique. Samuel held his staff in a defensive position that probably looked primitive by comparison. Any last words before I demonstrate why choosing a stick was unwise? Kalen asked. Just one observation, Samuel replied. You mentioned that tactical thinking matters more than physical ability in this trial. Correct. Then you'll appreciate the tactical significance of my weapon choice. Samuel's stance shifted slightly. You see, Princess, I didn't choose a staff because it's a good weapon. I chose it because it forces you to come close enough for this. He moved faster than anyone expected, not attacking with the staff but dropping it entirely and stepping inside Kalen's guard. His hands found pressure points along her armored forearms, spots he'd memorized from anatomical charts the night before. The energy blade clattered to the arena floor as Kalen's grip reflexes were temporarily disrupted by precise pressure applied to Valdari nerve clusters. Tactical lesson, Samuel said quietly, his hands now positioned near her throat in a hold that could incapacitate but not injure. Sometimes the weapon is just a distraction from the real strategy. Kalen stared at him in complete shock. How did you know where your people's pressure points are located? Research. Know how to exploit them. Human martial arts emphasize using an opponent's physiology against them. Samuel smiled. You're stronger and faster, but you've never fought someone trained to turn those advantages into disadvantages. I could break this hold. Probably. But not without injuring both of us, which would violate the trial conditions. Samuel's grip remained gentle but precisely positioned. Do you yield this contest? For a long moment, the arena was silent except for the sound of Kalen's breathing. Then, impossibly, she began to laugh, the same delighted sound from the night before, but louder. I yield, she announced. Third trial to the human. Samuel released his hold and stepped back, offering her a respectful bow. Trial score, 2-1 in your favor. Victory to Princess Kalen. Victory to me, yes, she said, retrieving her fallen weapon. But not the victory I expected. She looked at him with new respect. You lost 2 trials you knew you couldn't win, then won the one that mattered most by using my expectations against me. Sometimes the best strategy is to let your opponent underestimate you. And sometimes, Kalen said thoughtfully, the most dangerous enemies are the ones who make you think they're harmless. She addressed the crowd. Phase 1 of the combat courtship trial is complete. Captain Steele has demonstrated sufficient combat worthiness to proceed to Phase 2. As they left the arena together, Samuel couldn't help but notice that Princess Kalen was studying him with considerably more interest than she'd shown the night before. Tell me honestly, she said quietly, how long did you spend preparing for this trial? About 6 months. I've been studying your culture since the moment I knew I'd be coming here. 6 months of preparation for a single diplomatic mission. 6 months of preparation for the most important first contact in human history. Samuel glanced at her sideways. Though I admit, the marriage proposal was improvised. Kalen laughed again, and Samuel found himself thinking that he could get used to that sound. Phase 2 begins tomorrow, she said. Strategic wisdom. I hope you're prepared for that as well. Your Highness, Samuel replied, I'm beginning to think that nothing could have prepared me for you. The look she gave him in response suggested the feeling might be mutual. The second phase of the combat courtship trial took place in the palace's war room, a crystalline chamber where holographic star maps and tactical displays created a three-dimensional representation of the known galaxy. Princess Kalen stood before the central console like a general planning an invasion, which, Samuel reflected, she essentially was. Strategic wisdom, she announced to the assembled court, is the art of seeing patterns where others see chaos, of anticipating outcomes before they manifest. She gestured to the holographic display. Captain Steele and I will each command simulated fleets in a series of tactical scenarios. Best tactical solutions across 3 different engagement types determines the victor. Samuel studied the interface, noting how the Valdari strategic thinking was displayed in visual formats that emphasized territorial control and direct confrontation. What are the scenario parameters? First scenario, planetary siege. Second, fleet engagement in open space. Third, resource denial campaign. Kalen's fingers danced across the controls, calling up complex battlefield displays. Each scenario will test different aspects of strategic thinking, patience, adaptability, and long-term planning. Interesting choices. May I ask who designed these scenarios? I did. Based on actual historical conflicts where Valdari forces achieved decisive victories. Her smile was confident. Shall we begin with the planetary siege? The holographic display shifted to show a heavily fortified world surrounded by defensive satellites and patrol fleets. Samuel studied the tactical situation while Kalen explained the parameters. Standard siege doctrine, she said. You command the attacking force, I command the defenders. Victory conditions are either complete orbital control or successful defense for 72 simulated hours. Samuel manipulated the holographic controls, watching as his fleet took formation around the target world. Just to clarify, am I expected to follow standard Valdari siege tactics? You're expected to win, Kalen replied. How you achieve victory is your choice. Excellent. Samuel began issuing orders to his simulated fleet, but instead of massing for direct assault, he split his forces into seemingly random patterns. I declare victory. Kalen blinked. Excuse me. Victory achieved. The siege is complete. Captain, you haven't fired a single shot. My defenses are completely intact. Exactly. Samuel highlighted several positions on the display. I've positioned my fleet to control all 6 jump points into this system, established sensor nets to monitor all communications, and placed interdiction fields around major shipping lanes. The planet is now completely isolated from outside contact or supply. But you haven't taken the world. I don't need to take the world. I just need to make it irrelevant. Samuel smiled. In approximately 18 months, your defenders will run out of critical supplies. In 2 years, civilian morale will collapse. In 3 years, you'll surrender without me having to risk a single ship in direct assault. The war room fell silent as the implications became clear. Kalen stared at the display, then at Samuel. That's not how sieges work. It's not how Valdari sieges work, Samuel corrected. Human strategic doctrine emphasizes patience over glory. Why lose ships taking a world by force when you can simply wait for it to fall? Chancellor Thorne consulted his records. The scenario parameters do not specify a time limit for achieving victory, Your Highness. Technically, isolation leading to surrender does constitute conquest. Kalen's jaw tightened. Very well. Scenario 1 to you. But the fleet engagement will be different. The second scenario materialized. Two comparable fleets in open space, positioned for direct confrontation. This was clearly more suited to Valdari preferences for honorable battle. Standard fleet engagement, Kalen announced, taking command of the opposing force. Victory through destruction or withdrawal of enemy forces. Understood. Samuel studied the tactical display, noting the careful positioning of Kalen's ships in classical attack formations. May I ask a question about the victory conditions? What question? You said victory through destruction or withdrawal. Does that include voluntary withdrawal? Obviously. Excellent. Samuel immediately ordered his entire fleet to withdraw from the engagement zone. I declare victory by tactical withdrawal. That's not victory, that's retreat. That's strategic redeployment to a more advantageous position, Samuel corrected, moving his fleet to a nearby asteroid field. Your objective was to destroy my fleet in open space combat. My objective was to preserve my fleet for future engagements. Both objectives achieved. Kalen's control surface sparked slightly under her grip. You can't just run away and call it victory. I can if the strategic situation favors it. Samuel's fleet began establishing defensive positions among the asteroids. You're welcome to follow me into this asteroid field if you'd like to continue the engagement. Of course, that would negate your mobility advantage and force you to fight on terrain that favors smaller, more maneuverable ships. The princess stared at the display for a long moment, clearly recognizing the tactical trap. Her fleet was optimized for open space combat. Among the asteroids, Samuel's more flexible formations would have significant advantages. Scenario 2 to you as well, she said through gritted teeth. But the resource denial campaign will be fascinating, Samuel agreed. What are the parameters? The third scenario showed a contested star system with multiple worlds, each containing resources crucial to maintaining a war effort. Kalen's expression was grimly determined. Resource denial. We each control portions of the system. Victory goes to whoever maintains operational capability longest while denying resources to the opponent. Samuel studied the setup carefully. Unlike the previous scenarios, this one seemed designed to showcase long-term strategic planning, exactly the kind of thinking humans excelled at. Question about the rules, he said. Are we limited to military actions, or can we employ diplomatic and economic strategies as well? Any strategy that achieves the objective is acceptable. Perfect. Samuel began making rapid adjustments to his positions, but instead of focusing on military targets, he concentrated on communication relays and transportation hubs. I'd like to open diplomatic contact with the neutral parties in this system. There are no neutral parties. This is a two-faction conflict. There are always neutral parties, Samuel replied, highlighting several smaller settlements. Mining colonies, trading posts, civilian populations who just want to survive the conflict. I'm offering them protection in exchange for exclusive resource agreements. Kalen watched in growing alarm as Samuel's diplomatic initiatives began bearing fruit. You're turning this into a political campaign instead of a military one. I'm using all available tools to achieve victory. Why fight for resources when you can simply purchase them? Samuel's economic network expanded across the display. Meanwhile, I'm offering your controlled populations better trade terms if they switch allegiance voluntarily. That's not warfare. That's human warfare, Samuel corrected gently. We learned long ago that winning hearts and minds is more effective than conquering territory. Your military assets are impressive, but they require constant resource expenditure to maintain. My diplomatic network is self-sustaining and grows stronger over time. Within minutes of simulated time, several of Kalen's resource worlds had switched sides voluntarily, drawn by Samuel's combination of economic incentives and security guarantees. Her remaining military forces found themselves increasingly isolated as their supply lines were either severed or simply bought out from under them. "This is impossible," she muttered, watching her strategic position collapse without a single shot being fired. "You're supposed to fight for resources, not purchase them." "Why?" "Fighting is expensive, time-consuming, and destroys the very resources you're trying to capture. Commerce is efficient, profitable, and creates long-term relationships that benefit everyone involved." Samuel smiled. "Scenario 3 to me, I believe." Princess Kaelin stared at the holographic display for a long moment, then deactivated the entire system with more force than strictly necessary. 3 tactical victories to the human. Phase 2 complete. The assembled court murmured in amazement. No one had ever swept all 3 strategic scenarios against Princess Kaelin. "Your Highness," Chancellor Thorne ventured, "shall we proceed to Phase 3? "Not today," Kaelin said curtly. "I need to review the tactical data." She fixed Samuel with a stare that was equal parts frustrated and intrigued. "Captain Steele, a word in private." The court dispersed, leaving them alone in the war room. Kaelin began pacing, her movements sharp with contained energy. "You realize what you've just done?" she demanded. "Won 3 tactical scenarios using human strategic doctrine. Demonstrated that everything I've been taught about warfare is incomplete." She spun to face him. "Siege warfare that doesn't require battles, fleet engagements that don't require fighting, resource conflicts that don't require conquest. Where did humans learn to think like this?" Samuel considered his answer carefully. "From necessity. Humans spent most of our history as the physically weakest species on our own planet. We learned to survive through intelligence, cooperation, and adaptation rather than strength and dominance. And it works. We're here, aren't we? A species with no natural armor, no enhanced reflexes, no particular physical advantages, somehow managed to achieve interstellar travel and earn an invitation to negotiate with the Valdari Empire." Samuel smiled. "I'd say it works fairly well." Kaelin resumed her pacing, her mind clearly wrestling with implications that extended far beyond their personal trial. "The alliance negotiations, you're not just here to trade resources, are you?" "What do you mean?" "I mean that humans don't think like any species we've encountered. Your approaches to conflict resolution, resource management, diplomatic relations, they're completely outside our experience." She stopped pacing and looked directly at him. "You're not here to join our existing galactic order. You're here to change it." Samuel felt a moment of uncertainty. This conversation was moving into territory that his diplomatic briefings hadn't quite prepared him for. "Princess, Don't give me diplomat speak." Kaelin moved closer, her silver eyes intense. "Answer honestly. What do humans really want from this alliance?" Samuel studied her face, seeing not the arrogant warrior who had challenged him 2 days ago, but a brilliant leader struggling with the realization that her worldview might be fundamentally incomplete. "We want to survive," he said finally. "And we want our partners to thrive. Human strategic thinking isn't about dominance or conquest. It's about creating situations where everyone benefits from cooperation rather than competition. And if that requires changing how an entire galactic civilization approaches conflict resolution, then that's what it requires." Samuel met her gaze steadily. "The question is whether the Valdari Empire is ready for that kind of change." Kaelin was quiet for a long moment, her expression cycling through emotions Samuel couldn't entirely read. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful rather than angry. "Phase 3 of the trial is worthiness of character," she said. "It's supposed to determine whether the challenger possesses the moral qualities necessary to be a suitable partner for royal marriage." "I understand." "No, you don't. Because I've just realized that the trial isn't evaluating your character anymore." She smiled, but it was a different kind of smile than he'd seen before, less predatory, more genuinely pleased. "It's evaluating mine. Your Highness." The question isn't whether you're worthy of marrying a Valdari princess, Captain Steele. The question is whether I'm worthy of marrying someone who might be the key to our civilization's next evolutionary step. Samuel felt his pulse quicken as he realized that somewhere between the diplomatic games and tactical contests, something fundamental had shifted between them. This was no longer about honor or humiliation or even alliance negotiations. So what happens now? He asked. Princess Kaelin's smile widened, showing those sharp teeth that somehow seemed less intimidating than they had 2 days ago. Now, my future husband, we find out whether a warrior princess and a human diplomat can build something neither of our species has ever imagined before. I think, Samuel said, offering her his arm, that sounds like the most interesting challenge yet. The third phase of the combat courtship trial was scheduled to take place in the palace's Hall of Truth, but Princess Kaelin never got the chance to announce its parameters. The crisis began with urgent messages from the Outer System Defense Grid, followed by emergency sessions of the Valdari High Council, and culminated with Chancellor Thorne bursting into Samuel's quarters at what humans would consider an ungodly hour. Captain Steele, the elderly advisor gasped, clearly having run from the communications center, "We need your assistance. There's been a development." Samuel was already reaching for his clothes. What kind of development? A hegemony task force has entered our outer system. They're demanding the immediate surrender of all human personnel and the termination of alliance negotiations. Samuel felt his blood turn cold. The hegemony had been humanity's primary adversary for the past decade. A coalition of aggressive species that viewed human diplomatic expansion as a threat to their dominance model. How large a force? 15 heavy cruisers, 8 battle carriers, and what appears to be a new class of dreadnought. Thorne's expression was grim. Princess Kaelin is requesting your immediate presence in the war room. Samuel found the war room in organized chaos. Valdari military commanders surrounded the central display, their voices raised in heated debate about response options. Princess Kaelin stood at the center, still in her sleeping robes but somehow managing to project complete authority. "Captain," she called as he entered, "your people have interesting timing." "These aren't my people, Your Highness. The hegemony represents everything humanity opposes." Samuel studied the tactical display, noting the hegemony fleet's formation. "They're here to prevent the alliance, not negotiate terms." "So I gathered. The question is how to respond." Kaelin gestured to the heated discussion around them. "My military advisors are divided between immediate attack and defensive positioning. What does Valdari tactical doctrine recommend? Direct engagement. Meet them in open space and demonstrate Valdari strength through superior firepower." Kaelin's expression was troubled. "But after our strategic exercises yesterday, I find myself wondering if there might be alternative approaches." Samuel studied the display more carefully, noting not just the hegemony positions but the broader tactical situation. "Your Highness, may I ask about your defensive capabilities? Our fleet can match their numbers, though their new dreadnought is an unknown factor. Our planetary defenses are formidable." "Why?" "Because I don't think they're here to fight you." The room fell quiet as every Valdari commander turned to stare at him. "Explain," Kaelin commanded. "Look at their formation. They're not positioned for planetary assault or fleet engagement. They're positioned to blockade your system and prevent any ships from leaving." Samuel highlighted key elements of the hegemony deployment. "This isn't an invasion force, it's a quarantine operation." "Quarantine against what?" "Against human ideas spreading to other species." Samuel felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. The hegemony has spent centuries maintaining order through strength-based dominance hierarchies. If word gets out that humans can achieve strategic victories through diplomacy and economic cooperation, it threatens their entire model of galactic governance, Kaelin finished. "They're not here to destroy the alliance, they're here to prevent anyone else from learning about it." One of the Valdari commanders, a scarred veteran with the look of someone who'd fought in too many battles, stepped forward. Then we destroy them before they can report back to their superiors. General Korik raises a valid point, another commander added. Eliminating the task force prevents intelligence from reaching hegemony space. Samuel shook his head. Destroying them proves their point. It demonstrates that conflicts can only be resolved through violence, which reinforces their ideological position. Then what do you suggest? Kalen asked. Samuel was quiet for a moment, studying the display and thinking through possibilities that would have seemed impossible a week ago. What if we don't fight them or hide from them? What if we convince them to join us? The silence that followed was so complete that Samuel could hear the hum of the palace's environmental systems. You want to recruit the hegemony task force? General Korik's voice carried the kind of disbelief usually reserved for observing impossible physics. I want to demonstrate that human diplomatic principles work even on species that are ideologically opposed to diplomacy. Samuel began manipulating the holographic controls, outlining a strategy that made several commanders step back in alarm. What do we know about hegemony crew composition? Multiple species, bound together by shared allegiance to strength-based hierarchy, Chancellor Thorne supplied. They maintain unity through constant demonstration of dominance and submission. Which means they're held together by fear rather than loyalty, Samuel mused. What happens to fear-based organizations when you remove the fear? Princess Kalen was beginning to smile. They fragment. But how do you propose to remove fear from a military organization built around intimidation? By making them an offer they can't refuse. Not through threats, but through genuine opportunity. Samuel's smile matched hers. Your Highness, how would you feel about hosting the galaxy's first multi-species diplomatic summit? The next 6 hours were unlike anything in Valdari military history. Instead of preparing for battle, they prepared for negotiation. Instead of loading weapons, they loaded trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and technological sharing propositions. And instead of meeting the hegemony force with threats, they met them with an invitation. Hegemony Task Force, Princess Kalen's voice carried across open channels to the blockading fleet. This is Princess Kalen Vorthak of the Valdari Empire. We invite you to send representatives to discuss terms for a comprehensive peace treaty and trade alliance. The response came after several minutes of what was obviously frantic consultation. Valdari Princess, we are here to prevent illegal collaboration with human insurgents. Surrender the human personnel and we will withdraw. Counter-proposal, Samuel said, taking over the communication. Join us for discussions about reshaping galactic civilization through cooperative development instead of competitive dominance. First item on the agenda. How to make everyone richer and safer through strategic partnerships. The silence stretched longer this time. When the hegemony commander finally responded, his voice carried uncertainty rather than authority. Human, you are attempting to corrupt established galactic order. I'm attempting to improve it, Samuel replied. The question is whether you're interested in being part of that improvement or prefer to remain locked in an outdated model that benefits no one. What followed was 3 days of the most complex diplomatic negotiation in galactic history. Species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves at the same table, discovering that their fundamental interests were surprisingly compatible when approached through human-style win-win frameworks rather than traditional zero-sum competition. The breakthrough came when one of the hegemony captains, a reptilian species that had been conquered and pressed into service decades earlier, tentatively asked about the possibility of regaining autonomy for his homeworld through peaceful secession rather than violent rebellion. Absolutely possible, Samuel assured him. In fact, autonomous member worlds with special trading relationships tend to be more prosperous and stable than conquered territories. By the end of the summit, the Hegemony Task Force had transformed into the founding members of what would become known as the Galactic Cooperative Alliance, a diplomatic and economic union based on voluntary participation and mutual benefit rather than conquest and domination. You realize what you've accomplished? Princess Kalen asked Samuel as they watched the former hegemony ships take formation alongside Valdari vessels in the first joint patrol of the new alliance. We've accomplished, Samuel corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without a partner who was willing to reimagine everything she'd been taught about leadership and conflict resolution. Speaking of partnership, Kalen smiled, moving closer to him. I believe we never completed the third phase of your combat courtship trial. Worthiness of character, wasn't it? It was. Though I think recent events have provided sufficient demonstration. She took his hand, noting how her larger fingers intertwined with his smaller ones, different species, different capabilities, but somehow perfectly complementary. The question now is whether you're still interested in marrying a warrior princess who comes with the responsibility of helping govern a multi-species alliance. Samuel looked out at the ships representing dozens of species, all working together toward goals that would have been impossible for any of them to achieve alone. Princess Kalen Vorthak, he said formally, I can think of no greater honor than building this future with you. In that case, she replied, her sharp smile now radiating warmth rather than challenge, let's see what other impossible things we can accomplish together. The wedding took place 6 months later, attended by representatives from every member world of the new alliance. The ceremony combined Veldari honor traditions with human commitment rituals, creating something entirely new that somehow felt perfectly right. And if the bride was 7 feet tall with natural armor plating while the groom was an average-sized human with a tendency to solve problems through negotiation rather than combat, well, their differences had proven to be their greatest strength. After all, the most effective partnerships were built not on similarity, but on complementary capabilities and shared vision. And Kalen and Samuel had vision enough to reshape a galaxy.